All right, we are here on a Monday. Josh Storing, Josh Molnix. I'm in the driver's seat today. We're back Monday after Christmas. Josh, how you doing?
You know, making it through. Nice, relaxing Christmas. How
Good,
was
good.
yours?
Yep, fairly relaxing as well.
That yeah, we didn't really get a break from sports. There were sports literally all over the place, so not exactly a break from that side of things. But um, NBA Christmas Day, bowl season. Not that there were exactly very many super intriguing bowl games to be watching, but quite a bit of sports to watch. Happy to be here to break those things down and get into this week. And of course, we've got the bigger bowl games coming up. We've got the college football playoff. The NFL is crazy, um, and the NBA is well underway. So a lot to get to.
Yeah, quick rundown. Today we're going to talk NFL like we do right off the bat most Mondays after a big week 16. Then we're going to talk about things that we've already learned 3 games into the NBA season. Overreact a little bit probably, but that's just what we do. Then,
Absolutely.
of course, hear me please, winners and losers from the weekend. Then some college basketball talk. Couple big games happened over the weekend slash this Christmas break, and then we will close looking ahead Monday Night Football, what we're watching today. It, I really feel like this was, and I wrote about this in my 5 things from the week, but I really feel like this was the defining week of the NFL season. Because it seemed to me that we were kind of going along and there was the same general trends.
Hmm.
The NFC West was going back and forth between the Rams and the Seahawks, and the Colts and Titans just kept winning every week. And the same teams were pretty much in the playoff picture. And then all of a sudden, the Bears come out of nowhere, and the Cardinals lose a game they shouldn't have, so the Bears are in the playoffs. The Ravens jump in on the AFC side because the Steelers actually won a football game, which dropped the Colts out. The Steelers also clinched their division because Baker Mayfield and Nick Chubb couldn't beat the Jets without receivers, which I mean, it's still the
It's
Jets.
It's inexcusable. Don't give them
I,
any sort of out there. It's
there,
inexcusable.
there are reasons and there are excuses. It's still a game they should win,
But there are
100%.
no reasons. There are no reasons.
They had no receivers. I mean,
It's the Jets.
I
I refuse to give them any respect for losing to the. I don't care who is you have or don't have. If you have a competent running back and a competent quarterback, you should be able to beat. It doesn't matter who your wide receivers are. Just run a bunch of slant routes all day and run 10 plays down the field. It's the Jets for crying out loud. They don't get any. They don't get any benefit of the doubt. Nobody who loses to the Jets does.
and this is a we don't have to spend too much time on this game in particular, but this is a perfect example of my quarterback tiers. I think we've talked about this before, but there are quarterbacks who can win you Super Bowls, quarterbacks you can win a Super Bowl with, and
Mm-hmm.
quarterbacks you just can't win a Super Bowl with.
Uh huh.
Baker Mayfield is squarely in category 2 for exactly games like this one.
Sure.
Carson Wentz got the Eagles to now. It was a bad division, I get it, but Carson Wentz got the Eagles to the playoffs with essentially an offense that looked like that one, right? Last season,
Mm-hmm. Sure.
you were throwing out Greg Ward as your best receiver. The dude played quarterback in college,
Mm-hmm.
and they guys off the practice squad. It was a mess. He still got him into the playoffs. That's the difference between what Carson Wentz was last season and what he was in my estimation until he fell apart this season. Or you could throw any name in there: Tom Brady, Patrick Mahomes, whoever, and Baker Mayfield. I think you can win a Super Bowl with Baker Mayfield, but Baker Mayfield needs help, and that's what we learned this week, right? Because if that's a truly great quarterback or even a very good one, you win that game because he's just good enough to get the job done against the Jets.
And now they have to win. Now they have to beat the Steelers to get into the playoffs because the Colts are playing the Jaguars, and the Colts I doubt are going to lose to the Jaguars. So they're going to need to be 11-5 to get into the playoff because the Ravens also played. Who is it? They play somebody
Bengals,
bad.
Bengals,
The
right?
Bengals, yes, the Bengals. That's who they play. So we're talking about a team that 2 weeks ago looked like the best team in, or arguably the best team in that division. The Steelers were falling rapidly. The Ravens, yes, tough schedule at the beginning but it put themselves in a position where winning the division was not something that they could do. And now you're the third team looking in that division, it feels like. And you have the toughest game next week against the Steelers, while the Ravens and the Colts in particular in the wild card conversation get to go play teams that either are without their number one overall pick or the team that is, holding on to Trevor Lawrence, and that's the best reason ever to lose at the Jets. Apparently, not good enough for them, but now they've put them now because they couldn't beat the Jets. Now they have to go and beat the Steelers probably to get into the playoffs. It's a good point to talk about. If just win games that you're supposed to win for crying out loud, um, but it doesn't matter how few receivers they have. They should have won the game, and now they're in a position where they have to go and beat a Steelers team that, right, the problems with the Steelers are still there. They just were able to use the thing that they're good at to actually win this game against the Colts because the Colts couldn't stop Ben Roethlisberger. But now you put yourself behind the eight ball when a couple weeks ago we were talking about, can the Browns actually win this division if the Steelers keep sliding? And I can't remember the last time I doubted that the Browns were going to make the playoffs. And now at this point, here we are, and they have to win a game that on paper they're probably not supposed to win, and the other teams just sort of get to waltz to their 11-5 record, and the Browns got a lot of work to do.
And to this,
Waltz, the Jags. Imagine bookending your season at 10-6 with 2 losses to the Jaguars, because that's what happened. Because the Colts lost week 1
right,
to the Jags. That
and
would be embarrassing.
and now the Jags don't have anything to lose for. Trevor Lawrence is theirs, regardless of whether they win that game or not.
Sure.
For
It's
whatever
also a
that
bad football team. It's not like that's the difference between them winning or losing that football
right,
game.
right. And that's what I was gonna say. For whatever it's worth.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not like there is a clear incentive, or that your ability to draft Trevor Lawrence is banking on another loss. The Jets took care of that for you.
Sure.
And to the Steelers, exactly like you said. And this was my takeaway from that game. Yeah, they came back and won, and Ben Roethlisberger was much, much better. He was really good, as he has been most of this season. But it's the same story. They had 20 rushing yards.
Right.
The we've gone from, and Chris and I were talking about this after the Monday night debacle of, if this doesn't get better, I said they need a new quarterback. You can't have this kind of quarterback play. And it was also 1 week, and that was the important thing to also acknowledge, right? Sure. Ben hasn't been bad most of this season. Sometimes he hasn't been great, but by and large he's been
explosive.
Good.
He's
right.
Just not explosive.
Right. There's just a very limited array of things that they do offensively, even within the passing game. But when he's good to very good, like he was this week, it's enough to beat these playoff caliber teams like the Colts.
Mm-hmm.
The question that I would continue to have, that I think you and Chris and both had as well, is if you get this version of the Steelers, do they have the ability to hang with the Bills and the Chiefs?
Sure.
But coming into this game, you were very clear in asking the question that I was asking too, which is, can this team even win a playoff game?
I'm still doubtful about this team's ability to win a playoff game. This is just what the Colts do. They lose games that they're in control of and find ways to make their road to the playoffs harder than it needs to be. But I still have, I don't feel any differently about the Steelers right now than I did, 48 hours ago.
Right. And I think that's because we don't know the answer to that question. To me, the answer is yes if this team shows up, but we're not sure that this version of Ben Roethlisberger and this team is going to show up. It could also be the one that showed up last week and they're not beating anybody.
Right.
And then also, I want to talk about the Dolphins for a second here, but
sure.
But specifically, why are people freaking out about John Gruden's decision to kick the field goal and to burn the time? I don't understand why people think that there's a right or wrong answer to this because they ended up losing the game. I have a real issue with looking at the clock management as a real criticism here. When their defense let Ryan Fitzpatrick go down the field in 19 seconds and committed a personal foul on top of giving up, one of the more impressive throws I've ever seen, but why are we talking about the clock? In that situation, you can justify going both ways. You can say we want to burn as much time as we can, so we're going to sacrifice the extra 3 or 4 points that come with potentially getting a touchdown to kick the field goal to take the lead and know that something weird has to happen for them to move the ball that effectively in that short of amount of time to get into field
Mhm.
goal range. I think that's a very rational stance to take. The other side is you can go to force them to make them get into the end zone and say they also shouldn't be able to get into the end zone in 50, 45 seconds, whatever it would have been if they would have punched the ball in on third down. And even if they, and then the other part of this argument is right, even if they wouldn't have scored on third down,
Mhm.
if you come up short, then you just burn more time and you kick the field goal like they did. It's not like it's costing you points. So
Right.
I probably would have done that. But that is not the discussion we need to be having. The discussion we need to be having is that a team who knew they were going to be eliminated with a loss let that happen. That defense, and we talked about this going into when was that? About how historically, oh, it must have been they were playing a Monday night game, right? About how historic, or maybe it was a Thursday. Oh, they played on a
They got
Thursday.
smoked by the Patriots even,
Yes.
I think.
Who was it?
No.
I'm blanking on who it was. You know what I'm talking about, though.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
was it the Broncos? I think they played the Broncos. Yeah, yeah, that was the Drew Lock game where Drew Lock had they won in overtime, and Derek Carr got hurt and Marcus Mariota came in that game.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, we were talking about it before that game that because that was when they had fired Paul Gunther about how bad this defense has been over the past handful of seasons.
Mhm.
That's the story here,
It,
and
it, it's laugh out loud funny that the defense this the second to last drive started with 2:55 left in the fourth quarter. They went 70 plays, 71 yards over 2 minutes and 36 seconds and kicked a field goal with 19 seconds left. And the story is the poor clock management or the poor
right,
offensive decision when it was first and 10 on the Miami 25 with 19 seconds left.
right.
19.
That's what I'm saying.
They had not only did they get it into field goal range, they had another chance to get even closer to the end zone. They got to run another play, and it was just an incomplete pass. It's whatever, but how it's laugh out loud funny that the story today or the story last night was John Gruden's fault, not the defense for being able like like how would you give up it's like Hail Mary. You
Right,
know what the other team's gonna do. Just put all eight of your a three-man rush and put all eight guys on the 50-yard line and just don't let anybody run
right.
past you.
You can give up a couple 10, 15 yard passes that go out of bounds and you're still okay.
Exactly. 134-yard play is the only, and letting him get out of bounds is literally, and then you had roughing the passer as well.
Right.
So like you give up a 34-yard pass, you make an inexcusable mistake in the pass rush, and then a 44-yard field goal. Every NFL kicker makes that over and over and over again in practice, right? 44 yards is not a super difficult kick anymore, right? And the story is still John Gruden. It's an impossible being a coach is an impossible thing to win, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because also if you try to score there and you fumble it, or
Right.
there's a miss snap and you fumble it right there, or the running back fumbles it trying to dive into the end zone,
Mm-hmm.
then it's well, why didn't you just run out the clock and kick a field goal,
Right.
dog?
Right. Oh well,
Like
we're gonna get to that one in losers.
you,
Oh
you,
yeah, I got more
you
thoughts
just
on this philosophy.
you can't win. You just can't.
No.
It's ridiculous. And right, the other part of this, of course, is the Raiders officially eliminated. Miami now the 5 seed, I believe, because of tiebreakers,
Right.
and they play the Bills, right? Do they play the
Yeah.
Bills?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
do. They do play the Bills. So that's a tough one as well. But That's one I had forgotten to mention when talking about the Browns. But right, that's the other part of it here. Like, how are you not getting any flack as the defense who just needs to win this football game to keep your hopes alive? And instead, you're letting John Gruden take the blunt and to the offense to a certain extent when they
Hmm.
did exactly what they were supposed to do. Go and score and get the lead with as little time on the clock as possible. That's what they did, and yeah, that's a laugh out loud funny that that's where the heat is for the Raiders after that game.
Made me very angry. And the entire NFL has to be angry. Not the entire NFL, but you pointed out with the Dolphins. That game had massive playoff implications. That kept the Dolphins in. Now, of course, they were still always going to be a factor come week 17 because they already had 9 wins, but that kept them in the playoffs.
Mm,
You are looking at a very different world if they lose that game
mm-hmm.
because now you need to beat the Bills and get help.
Yeah,
Whereas now they are, like you said, they're in a position. Still they have to beat the Bills, but that's a Bills team that's already clinched the division. We'll see whether they want to rest guys or not. It could be worse. It's a less favorable matchup than most of these teams who get to play the the bottom of their divisions,
right.
Baltimore and Indianapolis in particular with the Bengals and the Jaguars. But that that could very well keep an AFC South team out of the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
That had massive implications. And yeah, we're out here talking about John Gruden's clock management, and not even clock management, but just his decision. They executed perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
Frustrating. Do you feel the same way I do that this is sort of we're going to look back on this regardless of what happens next week because there's so much to be decided the wild card spots in both conferences
Mm-hmm.
with the Rams Cardinals game also that got a lot more interesting with Seattle's win. Also forgot to mention the Bucks did what they should have done and then some to the poor Lions who didn't have half their coaching staff and Matthew Stafford got hurt.
Mm-hmm. I can't
So
wait for people to remember that the Buccaneers have Tom Brady in the playoffs. Everyone's gonna remember. Like I think people have forgotten who Tom Brady is to a certain extent. Have the Bucks been great? No, but you can't tell me that the Bucks don't have a chance to get to the NFC
oh yeah.
Championship game. Like, especially with all the, I mean, sometimes the Packers are just weird and they only show up for one half. Is Drew Brees still super dangerous? The question can be asked. And you still have the greatest quarterback of all time on your team, and it's not like the weapons there are are bad, right? I think it's just right. I was very much in a Tom Brady figures it out quickly. You were in a this will look good by the end of the season. It's just going to take a while. I certainly wasn't right, and you were closer to right, but neither of us. I don't think it's gone as well as either of us
No.
thought it would go.
No.
But a win like this, and then next week you finish off strong, and then that's an 11-5. They get to play the Falcons at home, right? And the Falcons are incapable of beating Tom Brady. It just doesn't happen. Um, you're talking about an 11-5 Bucks team that's won 4 straight to end the regular season. I think we might get to a point where people are like, oh right, the Bucks were really highly regarded before the season started for a reason. They ended up going 11-5. Right at one point, they were 7-5. So I think people had written them off to a certain extent. It's not like they've beaten the best of the best. It's been Vikings, Falcons, Lions, and then Falcons again if they win next week. But I to answer your original question, yes, I think this will be the defining week in a lot of ways, especially at right. The Chiefs clinched the first seed, the 1 seed with their win against the Falcons. The poor Falcons, man. The Steelers win the AFC North. If the Browns miss the playoffs, it'll be
Yep.
because of Week 16. If the Colts miss the playoffs, it'll be because of Week 16. Um,
The Seahawks got the NFC South, NFC West.
the NFC East is now right. Dallas and Washington are now tied at 6-9. The Cowboys play the Giants next week, and
Yep.
Washington gets Philly. Um, yeah, there's and I guess it's a silly thing to say, but there was a combination at the end of week 16. It's a combination of setting the playoff picture to a certain extent, also setting the stage for what might happen in week 17. But I think when we look back on who got into the playoffs and who didn't get into the playoffs, a lot of it will have to do with what happened this weekend. And the other part is that this was the weekend that there were a lot of teams, like better teams, playing each other. I
Hmm.
think like next week you've got so many teams that are playing. Right, you've got the Dolphins and the Bills, but this weekend you had some good football teams playing each other, and the best and the good football teams and the teams that might win multiple games in the playoffs were the ones who solidified their positions this week or solidified their divisions, whatever it might be.
Yeah, and we so also briefly. I mean, there's not much to say about Sunday night because the Packers just obliterated the Titans, and Devontae Adams is unguardable or getting very close to it. But that
And
was a
anybody who says the Titans have a real chance to win the Super Bowl are silly because nobody wins a title with that bad of a defense. It's like they're not even on the football field.
and
And
particularly up front. I mean, Aaron Rodgers just
right,
got to sit there and yeah, you
right,
can't. And when, especially when you're talking about some of these doing that against Patrick Mahomes, against Josh Allen. If there's one thing
right.
you got to do against Josh Allen, it's you got to bother him and you got to get pressure. They're not going
Yeah.
to do any of that. I'm kind of there with you. It's why
Like
yeah,
like you should never ever give up 448 yards of total offense in the snow. Never ever. Never ever. They
that
just I mean and right, Aaron Rodgers had 4 touchdowns, but like none of them were super right. It was a 5 yard pass to Devontae Adams, a 21-yard pass, a 7 yard pass, a 8 yard pass, right? So it's not like they were giving up big plays, but right, you can't let them run all the way down the field and get 234 yards as a run offense on 37 carries and then also just not play any defense in the red zone because then it becomes very easy and you just have no idea what they're going to do in the red zone if they've run it on you and then you can't stop the pass when they can score with these right 8 yard dinky slant routes, out routes, whatever it might be. Yeah, no team loses 40-14 in the last 2 weeks of the season and has a real chance to win the Super Bowl, especially right. You just your defense has to be better, and the Tennessee defense is so bad. So when Derrick Henry has a average night of 23 carries and 98 yards, which for most guys is a really solid night, for him it's just a little underwhelming. I still don't believe in Ryan Tannehill to carry you through a playoff victory if Derrick Henry is not the dominating
right.
force that he usually is. And if you're not good on the offensive end, your defense isn't going to help you out. It just never is. Like the Titans are not going to win a playoff game where they score less than 24 points ever. Like I would be surprised if they win any game in which they don't score 24 points because they can't seem to stop anybody else from scoring less than 24. At least
And
not recently,
and that might have been the most competitive.
except maybe the Jaguars.
That might have been the most competitive 40-14 game I've ever seen. It could have been worse than that.
Sure.
There were plenty of opportunities that they could have gotten. I mean, beginning of the after that long run by Tannehill, all of a sudden it was a football game in the third quarter, and that was the
Uh-huh.
end result. It shouldn't even have been a football game in the third quarter. So
Right.
I'm there with you. I got concerns about the Titans. You saw them last night. The Packers got their statement win that they hadn't really been able to get just because of their schedule. They played a bunch of okay, and it's also the reality of that division. You play right. You play the Lions. You play the Vikings. You play the Bears.
Right.
You're not impressed by beating any of them, but none of them are particularly bad either. I mean, the Lions are pretty bad, but
Mm-hmm.
they're not they're not Jaguars Jets bad. So there you have it. Week 16 in the NFL. When we come back, the NBA has arrived. So
Oh boy.
we're going to make some conclusions, lessons we've learned, takeaways, whatever you want to call it. That is coming up next. You're watching 110 Daily on the 110 Sports Network.